My name is Ellen Botner. I was born April 25th, 1933, and I'm a Holocaust survivor. My sister Inge and I were on the Kindertransport. We really never discussed it. Inge passed away in 1986. We'll forward to 1992. I received a call from my cousin. She saw an article in a Jewish newspaper about this organization, the Kindertransport Association, and they were having a reunion at the Financial Street Marriott. And it gave a phone number. I called, introduced myself, and asked if I could participate. I went there all alone. I didn't want anybody else with me. I had the most fabulous time. Such energy. And I got very involved in the Kindertransport Association. I became the treasurer on the board. And there is where I started telling my story. It just evolved. People at different organizations needed people to speak. And mine is one of the better stories. And people seem to be interested. And I like speaking to young people.
How many times do you think you spoke to younger people?
20, 30 times. I belonged to the Kruppenberg Holocaust Center at Queensborough Community College. And I spoke quite often to classes there, which is amazing because that campus is a rainbow. I think there's something like 100 different nationalities that go there. Some of the kids had never heard of the Holocaust. And I try to teach tolerance. The children have to know each other. If you know people and like them, even if you have different opinions. Example, when I joined the Kindertransport Association, we had 700 survivors who joined in the United States. There were many more, but there were 700, first generation. There are now 175. We're going very quickly. I'm 91 and I'm sure in 5 years I won't be here. In another 10 years, none of us will be here. It has to be recorded. It will be history, just like the Civil War. We read about the Civil War. We see enactments. But the Holocaust is recorded. They have photos. They can't deny it. And they will hear, the future generations will hear the spoken word. Maybe somebody will learn. We haven't learned yet. My early childhood, I don't remember much. It must have been good. I don't remember anything traumatic before Kristallnacht. We lived It was my father, Jacob, my mother, Meta, my sister, Inge, and myself. And we lived with my Oma Betty, who was a widow. And I recall a pretty happy life with nothing dramatic. So it must have been good.
Wow. Were you a very religious family?
No, we were not. We were kosher, and my parents were convenient Jews. You know, they kept Shabbos, went to synagogue.
And how far away was the synagogue from?
Walking distance, not far. It was a small town.
Wow. What did your parents do for a living?
My mother was a housewife. My mother's family had an international leather business. And my father worked for them. But after Kristallnacht, he had to work for the German government on the railroad. The whole family lived in this little town, Rexingen. My father came from a town, Heigelach, and we used to go take the train. My mother's family consisted of her brother, Kurt, and who migrated to the United States, and a sister, Lisa, who went to England as a maid. Before Kristallnacht, they both had left. Anybody who left Germany on a vacation or could read the papers and realize what was going on. And if they had half a brain, if they had the money, they left. Now, my father's family lived in Heigelach. He had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Oma, Fanny, both my grandfathers died before I was born. And the youngest sister, Aunt Hilda, was a nurse. And she went on vacation to Switzerland one time and realized what was going on. And she left Germany and came to the United States. And I was 5 years old when Kristallnacht happened. And that changed everything. I remember the German soldiers goose-stepping through our town, Rexingen, and I remember my mother holding us. And then the German soldiers came to our house looking for my father, and we had a horse trough in the back of the house, and my father hid in there under straw, and they didn't find him. I remember the synagogue burning. Inge had gone to school, and I remember, I think this is true, maybe it was a dream, I sort of remember going with my mother to get Inge. I remember the fear. And that was my first recollection.
That's your first memory?
Yes. My father's brother, Uncle Seligman, was very involved in Jewish affairs. And he was the one who found out about the Kindertransport. We had visas to come to, we had sponsors. But everybody had a number, a quota. So I guess my parents didn't know when we would get out. And when they heard about the Kindertransport, they decided to send us to England. Also, another brother, Alfred, was married and had a son, Richard. He also came on the Kindertransport to England.
Wow. And what was the age difference between you and Inge?
2 and a half years.
2.5.
So I was 6, Inge was 8. She was going to be 9.
And how old was your cousin who was also
Richard was 2 years older than Inge, so he was 11. He didn't travel with us. He had gotten out before us. July 1939. One morning we get up, suitcases are packed. My mother put 3 layers of clothes on us, including a winter coat. Nobody explained anything to me. I don't know if anything was explained to Inge. Never thought to ask. My mother took us by train to Stuttgart. There we met up with the other children. Nobody told us anything. Have to explain. 1938. The English Parliament passed a law that it would accept Jewish and other children who faced persecution. Each child had to have 50 pounds deposited so that they would never become wards of the state. And as soon as this law was passed, the Jewish community and the Quakers hustled to get sponsors. Each child had to have a sponsor. They opened camps, they opened schools, wherever they could find a place for these children. So when we arrived, we had to have a place to go. We would never become wards of the state. My foster parents signed up, and we were assigned to them. They got my parents' name, my parents got their name. And my Aunt Lisa, who was in Manchester, my sponsors, my foster family was in Manchester, so they met. In fact, the Shalyts sent my Aunt Lisa to London to pick us up so that we would see a familiar face. So anyway, I don't remember too much about this. I was 6 years old, and we met our fellow travelers and took another train to Holland, where we got on a boat, a ship, to cross the channel. I remember the boat ride vaguely. I remember sharing a bunk with Inge. I remember going to breakfast and I had white bread for the first time. I thought it was cake. So we landed in Hartwick and then took a train to London, Liverpool station. And I remember going to a large room and people coming to pick up the children. And I remember Aunt Lisa coming to pick Inge and I up, and then taking a train to Manchester, where we were met by a car, which was very unusual in those days. And we were taken to the most magnificent home.
Did it look just like this?
Yes, even bigger, just magnificent, with lawns and tennis courts and gardens. I remember this was our bedroom. I remember there's a seat here, and we used to sit there and read.
Wow.
Uncle Willie and Aunt Ray Shalyt were our foster parents. They had 2 children, Celia, who was 17, and Pauline, who was 14. And we were treated royally. We lacked nothing. We had maids. We were very well taken care of. September 1st, 1939, war broke out. Germany attacked Poland. England and France had pacts with England and France had pacts with Poland that if they were attacked, they would defend them. So they declared war on Germany. My father got out of Germany September 1st, 1939,
How?
to come here. Well, we had the visas, but because of quotas, you had to wait for your number. So my father got out. Came October 1939. One day, our suitcases are packed. Uncle Willie takes us to school. We were being evacuated. My school was being evacuated. We get to the railroad station. Uncle Willie meets his friend, Mr. Dunn. Mr. Dunn had 2 daughters, Maury and Adele. Maury was 12, Adele was 7. By that time, we must have understood some English and spoken some, but Uncle Willie tells Maury, "You do not let these girls out of your sight. You all stay together." We all get on a train and we go to this little fishing village of Fleetwood. Again, we go to City Hall and people come pick up the children that are assigned to them. And the 4 of us are sitting there. Nobody wants 4 children. So anyway, room, and 2 women, Maud and Muriel Bailey, had a house big enough for the 4 of us. Aunt Maud was the justice of the peace in the town, and Muriel was the principal of the elementary school. And they had never married. They took the 4 of us. And they took very good care of us. And we stayed with them from 1939 to 1944. Came school holidays in the summer, we used to go back to Manchester. In fact, I tell the story of one Passover. Uncle Willie invited American soldiers to our Seder. And one of these soldiers came from New York. And he wrote his wife. And she got in touch with my parents, saying how well we were doing, how good our life was. We always knew. My mother, I should tell you, my mother got out in May 1941. The original plan was for her to pick us up on the way to the United States. But by May 41, Germany was at war with England, but not the United States. It wasn't until December.
Mm.
So the ship couldn't stop in England. So she couldn't pick us up, and we were stuck in England.
Were you in communication with
My
her?
parents always knew where we were, and we always knew where my parents were.
That's incredible. And what inspired your foster family?
To take us,
Yeah.
Uncle Willie was a Russian refugee. He came there when he was 14. Luckily, he had an uncle who had a linen business, very successful, which Uncle Willie inherited. And he did very well. So I guess he had empathy for us children. And took us, and Aunt Maud and Muriel in England, everybody put themselves out. Summer of 1944, Aunt Maud and Muriel, the war was breaking, going down. D-Day had already happened, and the war was winding down. They weren't so afraid of air raids and things. So Mari and Adele went back to their parents in Manchester, and Uncle Willie put us in an orphanage in Blackpool, which is a resort town. And all the other children in the orphanage also had been on the Kindertransport. But these children hadn't heard from their parents in years. By that time, the story of the concentration camps had already come out. And here we were, Inge and I knew where our parents were, got packages and letters, and they didn't like us. We didn't like them. So we weren't too happy. December 1944, Uncle Willie comes one day. We pack our suitcases. We're supposed to catch a ship to England, to the United States. Didn't happen. Came back to Blackpool. February 1945. Again, we pack. We go back to Manchester. This time we go to Liverpool. Get on a ship. MS area. 2 weeks. It took us to cross the Atlantic in February, the North Atlantic. The first night on the ship, we go down to the dining room. You have to remember we had rationing. Never went hungry, always had food to eat, but very few vegetables, fruits, and everything was rationed. And here is this buffet with everything imaginable. Fruits, salads, cakes, meats. And by then I'm 11 years old. We gouge. Next morning we pull out. From the minute we left the dock, I was seasick. For 2 weeks. Never saw the dining room again. Because we traveled in a convoy, and a convoy has to travel at the speed of the slowest ship. And they protect each other. Anyway, we finally get to Halifax, Nova Scotia. On the ship, a woman had been designated to take care of us. But Inge and I were mostly on our own. By then Inge was 13, I'm 11. And get on the train, go down to Penn Station where my parents pick us up. I recognized my mother. I didn't recognize my father. And we go to Washington Heights, to this old one house on top of the other. No greens. We lived in a lovely house in Fleetwood with Aunt Morton. We go to this tenement, poorly furnished. I wanted to turn around and go back to it. It was a tremendous culture shock. Disappointment. My parents dreamed of 2 little girls, obedient little girls. They got 2 independent teenagers. In England, we were always very well taken care of, lacked for very little. But we were basically on our own. In those days, nobody hovered over you. You went out, played, were independent. And we dreamed of 2 loving, warm parents. And we got 2 parents who had been on their own for 6 years, who lived a life completely different. All they knew is eat, sleep, and you don't spend money on anything that isn't absolutely necessary. They went to bed at 7 o'clock at night. They ate foods that we weren't used to. So it wasn't this happy, warm reunion. We were completely different. We were young English schoolgirls, cultured. And they were like the old little town Germany. They still lived in a community with all these Germans. My parents spoke English. But we had absolutely nothing in common. When I speak to children, especially the immigrant children, find out why they came, how they adjusted. If you came with them, how you adjusted. And you'll find you'll understand them better, and they'll understand you better, and maybe there's more tolerance.
And what was it like when you were all here in New York? I know you said that it was a big culture shock coming, but did it get any easier?
No. I went to work self-supporting when I was 14. My parents still believed in bathing once a week, like in the old country.
Wow.
Was just so completely a different life than we had in England.
Did you and Inge both miss that life in?
Yes. Yes, we both missed it. Thank God I had Inge. My father was a typical German man, ruled the roost. You know, you never spoke against him. My mother was terrified of him. My mother was mentally ill. So she was unhappy. It was not a happy household.
And when did you move out of your house, or what happened?
Well, I always had Inge. So Inge and I were always very close. Inge got married in 1953. And once she got married, I moved out. I met a girlfriend and we rented an apartment in 1954. But I went to work at 14 and always worked after school. It was self-supporting.
It's incredible.
I always made a life for myself. I've always been very, very lucky. I got married in 1957 to Joseph Wagner. I have 2 sons, Robert, who will be 65. He lives in Driggs, Idaho. Funny coincidence. He's an RN, and he was living in Helena, Montana. And he had lived in Driggs, Idaho, and when he was admitted to nursing school in Montana, so that's how he got there. Sunday, he just got a job at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, in the hospital there. Monday night on McDonald's news program on Channel 2, they had a whole article on Jackson Hole, how people cannot afford to live in Jackson Hole and live over the mountain bypass in Driggs, Idaho, where Robert lives and has a house.
Wow.
And the reason they did it is the bypass from Jackson Hole to Driggs collapsed. And people couldn't get, 90% of the people who work in Jackson Hole live in Driggs. And they couldn't get to work. They had to do a round, which is a 2-hour trip.
Wow.
So they had an article on this, and he just started the job Monday.
This past Monday?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So that's Robert's story. Douglas lives in Woodbury, out on Long Island. He's divorced, and he has 2 daughters. Jacqueline, who lives in Sydney, who's married to Tim and has little Levi. And Alicia, who's getting married to Kevin in September. Inge married Stanley Tomarkin in 1953, and she had 3 daughters. Barbara, who's going to be 70, Gwenny, who passed away in 2018, and Karen, she was born 61.
Wow. You have a strong group of women.
Yes, and Inge had 7 grandchildren and has 2 great-granddaughters.
Look at all the women in your life. That's incredible. That's very heartwarming to hear.
So from 2
came.
We have 7, 9, 10, 12.
Oh.
12 of us. My roommate Joan went to the Borscht Belt. Remember, in those days we had the mountain hotels, the Concord. She went to the Laurels Country Club and she met this young man, Jack. Joan and I had an apartment in Brooklyn. One day, Jack and his friends came to visit us in Brooklyn. I was going out, but I saw Joan. And I said to Joan, I'd like to go out with him. He was the cutest. Labor Day, 1956, Joan and I went to the Laurel's Country Club. Saturday night, Joe asked me to dance. Never got away again. By December, we were engaged. By April, we were married.
Oh.
Now, with Ray, I've known Ray about 4 or 5 years. We belong to the same working group. June 2022, we went to a birthday party. Ray asked me to dance. Never got away again.
What songs were you dancing to?
Well, there was different music.
Right.
And Lindy and Hia Rock.
Oh, wow. Oh,
So we've been together 2 years.
That's amazing. Oh, so heartwarming to hear that.
I'm very, very lucky. I've had a very lucky life. I really have had. Joe and I were married 60 years. He died in 2017. Had very few problems. Had good kids. Had normal problems, but nothing major. Good health. Always had enough money to pay our bills. And
was he a survivor as well, or
no? Joe was born here. His parents were Russian immigrants.
Yeah.
Well, Ray is completely different than I. He was born in Texas, and his mother was an American Indian.
Wow. Wow.
He came from a family of 8 children. So our cultures are so different.
Yeah.
But he's a wonderful man, very good to me. Have a good time together. He has his own apartment, I have mine. But he's only 10 minutes away from here. I tell the children, you've got to learn from history. I am a pacifist. I'm completely against war. Doesn't solve anything. And when people know each other, they find out they have so much in common. And the more you know, the more learned you are. The more you realize that war doesn't solve anything. And our young men are killed. Whole generations are lost. The whole thing is talk, learn, respect each other.
Very well said. Is there anything you would like younger generations to know about your life?
I would like them to learn about it. You gotta adjust. Don't make mountains out of molehills. Most of our problems are small. They're solved in 2-3 days. And accept what happens. If you can change something, change it. If you can't, you gotta accept it. That's the deal you're dealt.
Yeah.
And you've gotta live with it. Always live simply. Try not to want what is not obtainable.
Yeah.
We don't need tons of jewelry. We don't need closets full of clothes. My car is 18 years old. It gets me where I want to go.
Yeah.
I don't need a Mercedes. Live within your means. If you don't have debt, you can be very relaxed. don't make trouble for yourself.